Hi everybody, last week I posted a video about how to achieve super natural looking foundation for everyday wear, and I explained two different ways to do that, to achieve it. So today we're gonna do the same but for nighttime. So method one. First, we're gonna use a very full coverage foundation, and I'm using Estee Lauder Double Wear, which I feel like is a very expected option for nighttime and for full coverage foundation. This does have SPF, but the SPF is very low, so it shouldn't give any flashback. However, there are several other options that have a lot of coverage but don't have the SPF. However, I feel like this is just so iconic and for a good reason. So I'm gonna start applying this because this is so full coverage and it is very matte as well. I like to have a very moisturized base. So I do use oil, and this is a slightly thick oil which is going to help the foundation glide on very effortlessly. So I'm going to pour a little bit in the back of my hand, just a tiny bit. Okay, so I poured a tiny little bit in the back of my hand, and I'm gonna start with my fingers applying it in the center of my face. And in my other video, I said that for full coverage, you have to use a dense brush because this is already very full coverage. I feel like if I apply it with a brush, it's going to look very heavy and cakey. So for a foundation like this, as I was saying, for a foundation like this, I like to dot it in the center and spread it with my fingers. And then blend it with a sponge. This is gonna give me the full coverage, but it's not gonna look cakey because the sponge absorbs some of the product. And you can layer if you feel like you want more coverage. Because we're gonna use this ideally at nighttime, we can be a tiny bit more liberal with our application because natural light is very harsh, so if you overdo it, it's gonna show more and it's gonna look pretty heavy under sunlight. I've talked about this foundation a lot of times before. I really like it because it's super long lasting, and if you blend it really well, you don't get any cakiness. It actually looks super natural, and I like to wear it during the day with cream products on top. Okay, so that's my first layer on, and I'm gonna take a tiny bit more, and I poured some in the back of my hand. I think this is a bit too much. And I'm gonna take an Artis brush, and I'm gonna dot it in the center where I want more coverage, and I'm gonna use the brush to blend it. And this is gonna give me a more perfected finish. And just to make it look even more like flawless but still natural, I'm going to very lightly go over with my sponge just to make sure that everything is very blended and that it absorbs some of the excess wherever I apply too much. The under eye situation here, we're going to conceal it with regular concealer, whatever you want to use. Because this foundation is very matte, I feel like maybe something too dewy like the Stretch Concealer by Glossier would be too much of a contrast. So try to go for something that's similar in texture. With the concealer, and I use the Too Faced Born This Way Sculpting Concealer because it is also matte, but it has a lot of coverage. So it did a really good job of canceling my under eye circles. Which actually tend to be emphasized when I use a lot of dark colors like I have right now on my eyes. So after this, because this is so matte, I would typically go with cream products, so cream bronzer, cream blush, cream highlighter, cream everything, and I would only powder in the center of my face if I wanted to, if I was going to be like outside or somewhere that's really hot and sweaty. But you don't really have to, especially if you're dry, because this foundation sets so well and it's so long lasting that it doesn't tend to get oily on me anyways at all throughout the day. So now I'm gonna do foundation method number 2. Okay, so I have no foundation again, and I'm gonna do the second method, which is still full coverage but a tiny bit more luminous. And I'm using, well, everything is completely different. The products are different, the skin prep is different, because I'm using a foundation that's more luminous. I didn't apply such a thick moisturizer, but I am going to use an illuminating primer, and I'm using the Hollywood Flawless Filter by Charlotte Tilbury, and I'm going to use this only on the outside of my face, so from the center outwards, focusing on the high points. And I'm just gonna spread this with my fingers. You can actually take this all the way in, but I like to focus it on the outside and then maybe bring it in. Okay, so that's the illuminating primer on, and now I'm gonna do the foundation, and I'm using obviously the Luminous Silk foundation by Armani, and this is also another iconic foundation, which is, it suits almost everybody. It's a very beautiful finish, and it has medium to full coverage, and it's very buildable. So I'm gonna again dot it on my skin, and I'm gonna again take an artiste brush and I'm going to spread it everywhere, starting in the center where I want the most coverage. And a foundation that's very dense is going to give you a lot more coverage than a sponge, because it's not going to absorb so much product. And it's also, because it's so dense, it's going to blend the foundation really nicely, so it's going to look almost airbrushed. So with a foundation like this, the concealing work is going to be a tiny bit more, you're going to have to work a tiny bit harder. So I'm going to use the Charlotte Tilbury Magic Away Liquid Concealer, and this is a new one, and it's not dewy, it's like in the middle. And I think this is going to layer really well on top of this foundation. And don't worry if your eyeshadow gets like dirty, you can fix that at the end. And I'm using again the artiste brush to spread the product, because I do want a lot of coverage under my eyes. Okay, so that's my coverage on, and now because this foundation is a tiny bit more luminous, I am going to apply a very light layer of powder, and I'm using the Laura Mercier translucent powder, and I'm focusing it mainly in the center of my face, and then with what I have left on the brush, I'm like running it very lightly on the outside, because I'm gonna use powder products. I'm avoiding this area here because I like the shine there. And now with the same brush, I'm gonna use my blush. And with a foundation like this, I would probably avoid cream products, but also that depends on your skin type. I feel like this would get really oily for me if I were to use cream products. Maybe I can get away with like cream to powder products, like the Chanel cream blushes. I don't know if they still have that anymore though. Okay, so that is the finished look, and I finished doing my blush and I did my lipstick. I didn't do much. My eyes were already done, obviously. I didn't apply highlighter and all that because I just don't, like, it's not my jam, but obviously you do you and you do whatever it is that you want. One thing I want to say is that I don't have a lot of scars, especially when I use full coverage foundations like this. But if you need more coverage, what you can do is use like a very small brush and use a very dense concealer and go like pinpoint conceal like whatever you need. And don't freak out if you feel like after doing your foundation the end result is not so flawless. After you go with powder, like, I mean, what I'm trying to say is like powder is going to smooth everything out. So don't freak out and just layer on your products and see how it goes. So I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope this was helpful and I'll see you soon.